And hello, everyone. This is Rich Sports Talk. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Once again, if you are new to the channel, you can always subscribe down here in the lower corner. Would love to have you on. And of course, if you have any questions or reactions, please reach out in the chat. Love hearing from you guys as always. Breaking it a little early this week. Of course, we will have the Friday preview at 10 a.m., previewing Dolphins and Jets. And well, the preview is going to be a little bit different because the Jets make a very surprising announcement. Now, after the weekend, there was a lot of speculation that it looked like Zach Wilson would make his return against the Miami Dolphins this weekend. Well, that has been delayed, and in his place, it will be Joe Flacco. There's so much to get into it, but let's start with the most important person involved with this decision, and that is Zach Wilson. Now, once again, this is completely speculatory, but this is what I believe has happened with Zach Wilson, and this is what I believe has led the Jets to make this decision. If you saw in the pregame video before the Bills game, Zach Wilson was working out and working out very hard, and they said they worked him out and they were testing to see how his knee would respond. My guess is Monday or Tuesday, when the Jets got back to the facility, it was still giving Wilson some problems. It wasn't 100%. And it's clear by Robert Saleh's comments that they will not be starting Zach Wilson until he is, without question, 100% healthy. So, given all that, I mean, a lot of people are killing the Jets for this decision, but this to me is the most important factor in the entire decision. And we'll get into Flacco, we'll get into Mike White, but to me, this is the biggest thing about this decision is you don't put Zach Wilson back out on that field until he is 100%. And if the Jets feel that he is not 100%, and I understand the timeline was 2 to 4 weeks, but once again, everyone heals a little bit differently, and it might be Wilson might be able to play, but if he's not 100%, the Jets are protecting their number one asset. I mean, really, that's what Zach Wilson is. And I liken this back to an example, which is when you have a young quarterback in the NFL, you want to make sure you don't screw them up. And one of the biggest detriments to a quarterback's career is getting injured. So, to me, the best example that I like to use is Robert Griffin III from Washington, which is when you watched this rookie year, you thought that this kid not only was going to be a good quarterback, but going to be a superstar. And then he had the injury to his knee late in the year. And even before that playoff game, I believed that Washington wasn't going to play Griffin because they said he wasn't 100%. It was a good pass rush. You're playing a very good team. And I said, look, if that was me, I understand the importance of winning a playoff game. I really do. But if you have a potential guy who's going to be your franchise quarterback for 15 years, I would sacrifice a year of winning a playoff game and a wild card game to make sure I had that quarterback. And you look at what's happened to Washington, they have not been able to find the long-term solution to quarterback since that injury. And Robert Griffin never was the player we thought he would be. So for the Jets, I get what they're doing. I 100% agree. It's a softer landing spot potentially with the Texans. But overall, if Zach Wilson is not 100% ready to go, this to me is the right decision. Once again, guys, put in the chat what your thoughts are about this decision, what you believe about Zach Wilson. Would love to get your feedback. So make sure you put that in the chat. Would love to hear from you guys. Here's the reasoning why Flacco to me makes a little bit more sense than Mike White. Now, I know a lot of people are going to get on me for this, but this is my thought process for Flacco. And I know a lot of people have been saying, well, Flacco isn't mobile, and this is a good pass rush. And Saleh's reasoning was, well, Flacco gets the ball out quicker. He can read defenses a little bit better than Mike White, and that's the thought process. But to me, the biggest reason is you have to look at this situation. I'm just reading some of the chat. Sal's reason to start Flacco is because he believes Flacco will perform better against Miami defense. Well, yeah. And I'm going to get into that. I do agree with you, BK. And this is the reason why is this season is all about development, right? So This organization, Robert Saleh, and everyone had to make a decision this past week, which is okay, Zach Wilson's not going to start. So, who is the quarterback that is going to help us the most evaluate our young players? Because it looks like you have a rising superstar guard in Elijah Vera Tucker. It looks like you have a very good running back in Michael Carter. It looks like you have a very good stud potential receiver in Elijah Moore. What quarterback is going to maximize and give you the best impression? Because going into next season, you have to have your roles defined. You have to have an idea of what you need in free agency in the draft. And if Flacco, you believe, is better than Mike White in terms of getting the most out of this young talent and being able to help you evaluate this young talent, then I agree with this move. And I do believe that Flacco, and I know he was 21 of 44 last year against the Dolphins, but I do believe that Flacco has the experience, he has the arm, he has the release. And look, for Mike White, he did a great job. I do think Mike White proved that he can be a decent backup. But what we saw against the Bills, and I know people have been jumping to say, well, you can't kill Mike White because, oh my God, like wasn't the Bills are the best defense in the league. And, they made Trevor Lawrence look terrible. And it was only Mike White's third start. And I get all of that. But you also saw the worst of Mike White, which is when they took away the short stuff, which he was very efficient against the Bengals. He had a lot of trouble pushing the football down the field, making those plays down the field because he doesn't have the arm strength. Flacco clearly does. And for Mike White, I do think he can be a very good backup. If the Jets need a spot starter or two, that's great. But then the other reason is I do think that for Mike White, the Jets don't want him to get exposed again in this game and potentially ruin his confidence. I think right now where they're looking at and saying like, at least we can rationalize to Mike, like, hey, you played a great defense in the Bills. If he goes out and plays terrible against the Dolphins, that hurts him. That hurts his. I don't think it would hurt his moxie because he's a very confident player. But to me, I do think that Mike White has proven enough to be a backup. And I know the argument of like, well, if he's going to be the backup, why not give him more reps? But at this moment in time for the Jets, and I get fans, like the fans want to see Mike White play. And I get it's a more watchable game when Mike White's in there. And I get that you're more excited to see the possibility of Mike White. But I think what you got out of Mike White is kind of what you got in the Indianapolis game, which is a guy who's going to complete probably 65% of his passes, maybe gives you a touchdown or two a game, probably an interception. Like he's a solid game manager at best. And look, for a backup quarterback, that is okay. But right now, they have 8 weeks left in the season. They have to make a determination like, do we have enough playmakers on this offense or do we have to go out and be more aggressive? Do we have a good enough offensive line? Do we have a good enough running game? And if you believe that Joe Flacco is going to help you answer those questions better, and don't forget, the Jets also did not see the Mike White game coming because I said this after the Mike White game. I've said this in the previews I've done throughout with Mike White. I said, look, Mike White had an unbelievable game. You can never take that game away from him. But the NFL, we have seen tons of games where guys come out of nowhere and put up performances that blow your mind, and then you never hear them again. I mean, one of the best examples is Jonas Grave, the New England Patriots. No one had ever heard of him. Comes out, rushes, what was it, like 3 touchdowns, almost 180 yards against the Colts, and then you never heard from him again. So there are those performances, and you hear that expression, any given Sunday. And I do think that Mike White has proven, like, look, he can play in this league in limited capacity as a backup. But right now, the Jets, they need to figure out, do they have enough weapons? Do they have enough playmakers? What can they do in this offense? Where are the limitations of this offense? Where are the limitations of Elijah Moore, of Michael Carter, of Ty Johnson, of potentially Denzel Mims, of Corey Davis? It's all about figuring out the pieces of this puzzle going forward. And don't forget, the Jets felt that Flacco was an improvement, or else they would not have given up a 6th-round pick. And I know everyone kills the Jets for giving up a 6th-round pick. And look, everyone's like saying, oh, they gave up a good pick. They gave up a valuable pick. A 6th-round pick, you are hoping you are hoping makes the roster. I mean, if the Jets give up a third round pick, then that's just ludicrous. But like they gave up a late third round pick. I don't get why people freak out. Because I guess they probably would have started Flacco against the Bengals if he was already on the team prior to this action. That was the thing. Mike White knew the playbook. Mike White was ready to go. And look, Mike White had a game of games, and because of that, he had to start against the Colts. And even in that game, it was clear Flacco didn't know the playbook enough. Now, the real question to me is who's going to be the backup. I believe it's going to be Mike White. I know Saleh said it's basically going to be Flacco's game no matter what his performance is, but I am curious because if it is Mike White and Flacco is like 2, 3 and outs, you're going to hear those chants at MetLife Stadium for Mike White. I don't think they're going to elevate Josh Johnson from the practice squad. But overall, I mean, this to me, like, I know Jet fans are disappointed. I know everyone, and thank you, BK. I missed that part of the press conference. Yes, so Mike will be the backup. I mean, White will be the backup. I just think that this is a situation where the Jets, they made an investment. I keep hearing this too, like, oh, this is just because the Jets invested a draft pick and that's why they're playing Flacco. It's also a conditional pick. It becomes a 5th round pick if he gets a certain amount of playing time. Now, I think that was like 2 or 3 games, so I do think they're okay. But if it's a conditional pick and the Jets feel like it's dead even between these two guys, then I do think that they play Mike White. But I mean, Flacco has proven, I mean, even last year in the sparing times with the Jets, he played better than Sam Darnold did in a lot of those games. And Flacco, look, like at this point in his career, he's a backup, but he's a solid backup. And the reason he's not starting in Philadelphia and the reason he's not playing is because they have a young Jalen Hurts that they got to see what they have in. And they also traded for Gardner Minshew. But that also proves to me that they're not exactly sold on Jalen Hurts because why are you bringing in another young quarterback with upside who you think can push your starting quarterback? So, but once again, for those of you just joining us, you can put in the chat any questions that you have about this move, but it is official. Joe Flacco will start against the Dolphins. We'll do more about this in the preview, breaking down the matchup on Friday morning at 10 a.m. Of course, put down your questions on the channel in the comments for Friday if you have any of them. Once again, the Jets making the decision to go with Joe Flacco. I know a lot of Jet fans, I've been reading Twitter, a lot of Jet fans, a lot of analysts killing the Jets for this move. It's like people just love to kill the Jets just to kill the Jets. I just think it's such a low hanging fruit, but it's one of those things too. It's like we have to be realistic about this thing. I mean, people are killing the Jets. Oh, how like they thought Mike White was the second coming. A lot of that was also the media like really bumping up Mike White. And I said, look, I get we're excited. I get that it was an incredible performance, but Mike White is probably going to be a good backup at the most. Maybe he becomes a serviceable starter, like maybe a Teddy kind of Bridgewater guy. But there's a reason he went in the 5th round, and I like Mike White a lot. But there is this thing where I'm just a little bit surprised, where like everyone blew this out of proportion. I'm like, look, people are like, oh, the Jets, of course, got killed by the Bills. I'm like, the Bills are also a team that everyone's picking to go to the Super Bowl, and the Jets are playing a backup quarterback who's making his 3rd career start. I mean, we have to be realistic. And this week, too, I mean, look, to me, Flacco is just a better option right now because you know he can play in the NFL, you know what he can do, and you know that he can push the ball down the field. I think it's just frustrating for Jets fans that we don't get to watch our young quarterback develop for another week, but that frustration is being misdirected as this decision. BK, you hit it right on the head. That to me is where the frustration from Jet fans is coming from, is you're not seeing Zach Wilson. But then again, like I said at the start of the show, if Zach Wilson's not 100%, and God forbid, let's say Sal puts him out there and Wilson gets hurt, and especially when you're dealing with a knee, I want him to be 100% in a lost season. You're not going to the playoffs this year. Like we just saw Washington. What happened to Washington? Their prized possession, Chase Young, tore his ACL last week. Because an ACL is about a 9 to 10 month recovery, he's going to miss the start next season likely. So if Zach Wilson got a major knee injury, the Jets would be screwed not just this year in his development, but they'd also be screwed because they'd be starting the 2022 season likely with a backup quarterback. So I get why Jet fans are frustrated because really right now, the thing we want to watch is Zach Wilson's development. That's the thing we want to watch because this defense isn't very good. I mean, to me, I love watching Elijah Moore and Michael Carter. Like the last couple weeks, you just see them getting better and better, and that's exciting to see. I'm a nerd. I love offensive line play. I love watching Elijah Vera Tucker play. I mean, the last week he had a great play on film where he was able to take two blitzers and basically stop two blitzers at once. And I'm like, okay, this kid's got something special. So, but I get it. The big draw is Zach Wilson. You want to see Zach Wilson play, and you felt, and like, let's be honest, as Jet fans, your hope was Zach Wilson comes out and outplays Tua against a bad Dolphins team, and then you can help hold your head a little bit higher because you're like, well, this has been a disaster year, but at least it feels like my organization has their quarterback figured out, and the Dolphins are just lost with their quarterback decision. Like that's what I think a lot of Jets fans were hoping for. And even if they win this game with Joe Flacco, you're kind of gonna be like, well, it's great to beat the Dolphins, but it is Tua. They're not a good team, and Joe Flacco isn't gonna be here long. Like that's the big reason why you're like, okay, this win's nice, but and I know one of the things I kept seeing on Twitter's too is like, oh, the Jets are just doing this for draft position. The Jets aren't doing that. I mean, the Jets right now, like they do have the 3 and the 7 pick, but this is a completely different draft. First of all, as a general manager, you have to hit on wherever you're picking in the draft. But second of all, this is a completely different beast because the Jets hope they have their young quarterback. Last year was such a unique case because you had arguably the best quarterback prospect in a decade and a half that was going to be the number one pick. That's why the draft position was so pivotal last year. And this year, it's like whoever gets the first pick, you know, you don't even know who the number one picks, in my opinion, is going to be. I do think Thibodeau from Oregon's likely going to be the celebrity one, but Aiden Hutchinson's had a good year. Neal's had a good year at left tackle. I mean, it all depends on who gets that number one pick. So far, this draft class has been great aside from Zach Wilson, but that's okay. Wilson got them. And look, being quarterback's hard. Like, don't forget, too, Wilson, one of the reasons he's been bad this year, too, is because he's had to completely change his mindset because we know the upside, we know the arm strength. But the problem is when you play hero ball in high school and when you play hero ball in college, you see that works. And the problem is the best game he had was when he was playing hero ball against the Titans. But I do think the good news is by watching, hopefully, Flacco this week and watching Mike White and Josh Johnson is saying, look, I can take this offense even better because unlike them, I can throw it down the field to make the big play. But if I just give it to Elijah Moore in space, if I just give it to Michael Carter in space, if I just check it down and not take the big sack or try to run around and make a big play, not only does it save me time, energy, and getting a beating in the pocket, but we can move the football. So, I mean, I really like this draft class too. And everyone kills Joe Douglas for the 2020 draft class. But I keep reminding people, like, to me, it's almost like a mulligan at this point because he was drafting for a very different head coach. It's like being the general manager of a restaurant and you have two completely different chefs. You're going to give them different ingredients. So, I mean, you look at like the types of players that they targeted in that first draft and the type of players they targeted in the second draft, very different. Very different players. And I do think that don't forget too that 2019 draft, it was a weird one because that was really like the COVID draft too. You had so much going on with that draft. I mean, last year was a little bit more normal and like people had gotten used to that process. So I do think that helped in that process. So, I mean, that was Joe Douglas's first draft and it was basically with a pandemic going on. So, I mean, that probably didn't help the process, but I mean, I've really liked his draft class this year. And look, people are killing like Zach Wilson. People are killing the Jets. But I mean, I keep hearing this like, oh, the Jaguars look so good. I mean, really? Trevor Lawrence does not look good. Trevor Lawrence looks lost down there. I mean, Justin Fields had the great game against Pittsburgh. But also Pittsburgh just went toe-to-toe with the Lions and tied. And Justin Fields has had his fair share back. And the only rookie that's looked good is Mac Jones. And let's be honest, Mac Jones has a top 5 offensive line, a great running game, and the Patriots spent $300 million to put weapons around him. So if he wasn't succeeding, I would have a lot more questions. But I got off track. But Getting back to this, once again, any questions about this move? Are you happy with Joe Flacco? Do you want to see Mike White play? I mean, personally, I think that I might be in the minority, but I do think that this is the smart move because I do think, like, you've seen Mike White, you know what he can do, you know his limitations. But I think with Flacco, you're trying to see what you can do down the field because Flacco gives you the vertical passing game. Mike White showed in that Bills game, like when they took away the short pass and forced him to throw it down the field, he really struggled. And I do think that Sal brought up a good point, and people are saying, well, if they were worried about the blitzes with Mike White, then why didn't they start Joe Flacco? Mike White, that thing became such a big thing, and Mike White really deserved the opportunity after playing 5 good quarters. I mean, there would have been probably a mutiny on that team if Mike White didn't play. And you saw what happened is Mike White, show he is an okay quarterback, probably good backup. If you need him for 2 starts, you're good. But if you play a really good team like the Bills, he's going to struggle. And he did. And for Joe Flacco, what you're going to get. A big arm. You're going to get a guy that's seen pretty much every kind of defense. And you saw it last week. I do think last week has a big impact on this because don't forget, Lamar Jackson is incredibly athletic. And he's been in this league for 3 or 4 years. And Brian Flores confused him left and right. And I do think Saleh made the educated decision like, look, Lamar Jackson can get away from pressure that Mike White can't. And Mike White, that'll be his 4th start. I just think that he made this decision, and I get the athletic comparison between the two, but I think his decision was like, look, they're going to throw stuff at Flacco, but he's not going to get confused like Mike White would. And you don't want to also shower the confidence. And I think it'd be very difficult with Mike White, but you don't also want to hurt a guy who you're hoping is going to be your long-term backup. If he goes out there and throws 3 or 4 picks against the Dolphins, and then he throws 8 interceptions or 7 interceptions in 2 games, you're just killing that kid's confidence. And you don't want that for a guy who you're hoping is a big piece of your future. They said the same thing about the Lions, and I watched the end of the Lions-Steelers game. They definitely look worse than us on offense. No excusing the Jets are getting blown out, but there is context to other bad games. I was at the Bills game, and as soon as he threw that deep ball, me and my friend looked at each other knowing it was going to get picked off before it was even picked. Thank you, Richley. Someone has sensibility. Thank you, Chitty. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me. If you're guys new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I'm going to do a full preview on Friday. We're going to talk about the Jets defense, especially on Friday. I know that that's been a hot topic. And look, like I know they've been getting killed this week. Just a quick side note on the defense. I mean, I know it's easy to rip the defense. I know a lot of it, people saying, oh, it's a scheme. I do think there's 2 big things that help the Jets. Number one, they don't play really elite quarterbacks the rest of the way outside of Tom Brady. And they don't face highly athletic quarterbacks down the way. I mean, you look at the quarterbacks they've played that have been killing them. It's been Matt Ryan. It's been Mac Jones, but really it's been that great New England system. And New England has a lot of good playmakers, and Bill Belichick's and Josh McDaniels are incredibly smart. It's been Josh Allen, who's many people could consider being an MVP candidate this year. I mean, it's Carson Wentz, who, when he's right, can be a potential top 10 quarterback in this league. The Colts have one of the top 5 offensive lines. It's just like been bad matchup after bad matchup. But I do think the Jets actually match up well in some regards defensively this week against the Dolphins. And I'll make sure to get into that on our preview. Once again, 10 a.m. on Friday morning. You can, of course, subscribe, comment below, and make sure you have your comments ready for that chat. We'll love to answer your questions during that game. But do you think if the exact same team was in Oklahoma or any small, do you think they're getting killed? Like, no, it's because it's New York. I mean, and for some reason, like it's easy because it's the Jets, because of their history, because of the stake business, because people know how passionate the fan base is and how easy to poke and get everyone riled up. I mean, people are like killing the Jets, but during the same time period, the Jets have been god awful. The Giants have one extra win. I mean, I think the Giants deserve just as much blame. And in some ways, the Giants, they've had opportunities to really right the ship and had more opportunities than the Jets and have had more dynamic players than the Jets and have had better chances to get the head coach right, the general manager right. And they've really kind of screwed that up. I mean, I think the Giants could become the next Jets simply because the Jets, at least for the first time in a decade and in 10 years, are on the same page. The general manager, the quarterback, and the head coach are all on the same timeline. For years, I've been going out. I'm going to go on a tangent here. Sorry, guys. But for years, the biggest reason to me why the Jets are in the position they are is because when they made the decision to keep Rex Ryan and fire Mike Tamba, because then you had a head coach and a general manager that were never on the same page. And ever since then, you either had a head coach that felt he had to win and get to the playoffs to keep his job, and a general manager that was rebuilding. And then you flip flop where the general manager felt that they had to make the playoffs, but the coach wanted to rebuild. I mean, it was always like this up until the end of Adam Gase. And you look at the Giants, my big thing with them, and I can do a complete video on this if you'd like, is they could easily be the Jets 2.0 because what's going to happen at the end of this year? Let's say the Giants, finished 6-11, 7-10. What's going to happen? Dave Gettleman's likely getting fired. Okay. So what happens now? Do you bring in a general manager, but you have to keep Joe Judge? But then if you completely clean house, you're then going to have 4 head coaches in a row that have gone 2 years. If you're a decent head coach and you see that you either have to be with Daniel Jones, that's the other thing. Is this new coach and general manager going to get Saleh like Daniel Jones? They have to make that decision. And oh, by the way, they're going to have a quarterback draft, which isn't great. And likely, I know they have 2 picks that look pretty good right now, but my guess is by the time we get to the end of this, I would say the Giants and the Bear pick that they have are likely going to be, let's say, 9 and 10, maybe 12 and 13. So if you really want a quarterback, you're going to have to give that up. So, I mean, in the Giants too, like people are like, oh, the Giants, like if it's a great opportunity. Okay, you have the 2 first-round picks, but they're going to have $2 million in cap space. They have a bunch of contracts because Gettleman knew that this would be the year he had to get to the playoffs, and he spent a boatload of money on wide receivers, on Leonard Williams, on the offensive line, and they have a lot of bad contracts. The one thing you have to say, and I know Joe Douglas gets killed in free agency. I know that people wish he did more, and I get that. But you can't say this about him. He has not had a bad contract in free agency, and the Jets are still paying for Mike McCagnon. I mean, Trumaine Johnson is still on the team this year. This is last year's contract's on the team. Think about that. McCagnon has not been here now for 3 years, and that contract's still on the books. I mean, say what you want about Corey Davis, say what you want about Lawson, say what you want about those contracts that they were a lot of money. Realistically, they were 2-year deals. So if they don't pan out, Joe Douglas can get out from under them. I know, DJ, it's been awful since 2011, but think about it. That's what I said. That's when it started. Is when they got the head coach and the general manager both on opposite planes, where you had one that needed to win and one that wanted to build, and then the roles would switch because they knew that they had playoffs. I mean, that's why McCagnon spent all that money in 2015 was to try to help save his job. So Mike White struggles against the best defense in the NFL and gets pulled for Flacco. What an awful reactionary move. I mean, I get why you understand that, but also the Dolphins defense is very similar. Like it's a very aggressive and blitzing defense, and Mike White, I think, is going to have a lot of trouble with that. And I get why people are saying that. I understand why. But you look, and I get you want to see the young players. The biggest thing for me is which quarterback helps the young players on this offense. Which one's going to help out this young offensive line by understanding the blitzes? Which one's going to help by getting the ball down the field and understanding where the ball goes? Look, for all we know, Mike White, let's say he started. What if Mike White went out there and threw 3 interceptions? We'd be killing Robert Saleh and the Jet team for not starting Joe Flacco. And I get it's easy to second guess a decision when then the Jets have been so bad for this long. And it just feels like, oh my God, everything they're doing is wrong. I mean, think about it. Mike White goes out there, plays terrible. Oh, the Jets have Joe Flacco. We paid him a 6th-round pick. Why is he not playing in the game? I completely get that. Hi, Nolan. So I know by this first sign of Sal on the floor panicking, should be sticking with White, Zach isn't fully healthy. I get the argument for sticking with White. I get that. But we also have to remember that they watch a lot of tape. And don't forget, even in that Bengals game, there was a couple passes that hit off the defender's hands, even in that Colts game. So I do think that White, to me, has shown he can be a capable backup. But still, I just feel like right now, they just feel like Joe Flacco, once again, this is about the development of young players. I think that they feel that they've seen enough from Mike White that they know what they have in him. But what they don't know is how much they have in potentially guys like Denzel Mims if he ever plays, Elijah Moore. They're trying to figure out what pieces that they have going forward into next season. Does it really matter which backup starts the game? Unless it's Zach Wilson, doesn't really matter. Like, that's also the biggest point. Everyone's like freaking out, like, who's starting this game? I mean, we're talking about the backup quarterback. I mean, Zach Wilson is this team's franchise quarterback. It's a bummer he's not playing. That's the thing that stings about this game is you wanted to see Zach play. You're not going to see that opportunity. But once again, wait until he's 100% healthy. And to me, it's when it came down to this decision, it's what Robert Saleh believes. Which guy am I going to get the most out of, and which guy is going to help my young team progress more? And look, Mike White it's not like Mike White is a great athlete. I mean, Mike White is a pocket quarterback. Both of these guys don't have great athleticism to avoid the pass rush. So when it comes down to it, it's like who can make the quick decisions and see those reads at the line better? Especially when you have a defense like the Dolphins that use unorthodox looks, that bring pressure from everywhere, that love to blitz and love to disguise blitzes. To me, that's Joe Flacco because he's been in this league for a decade and a half. There really isn't a lot that's going to surprise him. Question is, can he go out there and do it? But for Mike White, I mean, it's once again, we might hear the chance if Flacco struggles in the beginning. This is just to justify the trade. Johnson, nothing wrong. Like, look, I get why some people think it's the trade, but also keep in mind those two games. I do think Flacco would have started if he knew the playbook. I mean, there's a reason why Mike White has been on the practice squad list for this team and has been cut multiple times. And would you rather see how White rebounds? I mean, that's up to this coaching staff too. I mean, I get that he played a great defense and maybe he could rebound. And I know some people are going to say, like, well, they just don't want a quarterback contract when Zach gets back. But I don't see that being the case. I don't see that being the situation at all. What I see is they've had now 3 games to see film on Mike White, and they see that, look, like this offense works efficiently under him. But we've also seen a lot of what teams have adjusted. I mean, you can't tell me that the Dolphins weren't watching the Bills tape and seeing that Mike White was struggling with pressure. Mike White was struggling to push the ball downfield. You don't think that the Dolphins with Brian Flores, and look, you can criticize them for being a mess this year in their offense, but one thing is their defense and their secondary, especially, they have playmakers just like the Bills in that secondary. And you're not telling me Brian Flores didn't watch that tape. He's like, all right, I'm going to take away the short stuff, pressure Mike White to throw the ball down the field. And he struggled with that. So, bare minimum, we get to evaluate our squad with a veteran quarterback for at least one game. That's exactly what I'm saying. I think that's the whole point to this is basically what quarterback gives you the best way to evaluate your team. Is it Joe Flacco or Mike White? If that's what this organization feels is the right way, and that they feel that this is the right fit for this team and who's going to get the most out of these young quarterbacks, absolutely. Would rather watch White, but I don't care who isn't. Like, that's the way you got to look at it too. I mean, that's a big thing about this whole game. It's not Zach Wilson. If it's Zach Wilson, you'd be excited. You'd be thrilled. I mean, even if Joe Flacco wins this weekend, a part of you is going to be like, oh, that's great. We beat the Dolphins, but would have been so much sweeter to see Zach Wilson. And once again, I have to say this is I'd rather not see Zach Wilson this weekend than put him in harm's way, put him in a game, put him in a situation where he could potentially get hurt or just damage his confidence because he's not able to use his mobility to avoid the pass rush like he usually can. He's not able to read those adjustments, and he just gets killed. He gets buried in this game. And you just see basically a quarterback that's just like, look, I came back too soon and I'm not ready to go. And I mean, it's just one of those things like with this Jet team, I think you have to make the best decisions long term for your team. And to me, that's putting Zach Wilson on the bench. I know a lot of people argue like, oh, well, the quarterback's healthy enough to go, he should play. Yeah, this was if this was a big game and this team was like fighting for a playoff spot, absolutely. But they're not fighting for a playoff spot. They are trying to figure out their footing. They're trying to figure out their identity, and they're trying to figure out how to make this young quarterback be a success in the NFL. And if that means keeping on the bench for one more week, I'm fine with that. And I know it's hard because a lot of Jet fans have paid a lot of money and they want to see the Jets beat the Dolphins. And it could be one of the most memorable things of the year if this team could go out there. And it would have been great if Zach Wilson could have outplayed Tua. But again, this is about the war. You always hear that expression, lose the battle, win the war. I'm okay with the Jets losing this battle. I'm okay with them doing that and just to protect Zach Wilson. Just want to see if there's any more questions in the chat before we head out for the day. Once again, for those of you just joining us, Joe Flacco has been named to start against the Miami Dolphins by Robert Saleh. Mike White will be the backup in that game. Zach Wilson, not 100% ready to go. My speculation, once again, because of the NFL schedule, is they worked him out hard on Sunday before the game. My guess is Jets and teams usually have Monday off. My guess is they came back for treatment on Tuesday. The PCL on the knee wasn't reacting as well as they had hoped. Maybe it was a bit sore. And then I believe they made the decision probably yesterday, but they didn't come out with the decision until, of course, today with the media. But I think they made the decision yesterday, like, look, it's not rebounding. It's not reacting as quickly as we had hoped. So we're going to do the smart decision, especially with a team that only has 2 wins. We'll make the smart decision. We will make sure that Zach Wilson is 100% when he's ready to go. Once again, guys, we'll be doing a full preview 10 a.m. on Friday where we will break down the Jets and Dolphins matchup this upcoming weekend, talking about the offense, how this defense can somehow find a way to rebound after the awful and historic performance that's been just disrespectful. It's just been so bad. But I do think that this matchup actually lends itself to actually help out this defense a little bit just because of the personnel of the Dolphins. So I'll break that down on Friday morning, talk about this offense, especially now with Joe Flacco under center, the continued growth of Michael Carter and the use of Elijah Moore within this offense, and potentially what this Jet offense can do to generate more points, especially how to get Corey Davis going. And will we see Denzel Mims again, or is he basically going to be like he was the first couple weeks of the season, just an afterthought for the second half of the season? So much again to guys. Thank you again for joining us here today. Appreciate it as always. Looking forward to seeing you guys on Friday. But until next time, I'm Nolan Rich, and this is Rich Sports Talk. Thank you very much for joining us.